The insult arrived without warning, delivered with the ease of a passing comment. My father from his chair spoke loudly to the assembled guests. "She's still a junior employee only." The announcement carried no weight for him, yet it landed with precision. Colin followed by dragging a single finger along the edge of my gala invitation, then slicing it cleanly in half. As the cardstock split, he added with a dismissive edge, "She can't even afford rent." My mother let a thin smile appear. "Poor kids should learn to save." She murmured, her voice soft enough to seem harmless. "Use the money for clothes and makeup to pay bills instead." She commented the thought, barely a whisper. The heat didn't rise in my face. Stillness served me better than reaction. Nothing in my posture shifted. The sound of the cardstock splitting reverberated inside my head, muffling every other noise. Conversations blurred. The clinking of utensils faded. One simple gesture had turned the entire table into an audience. New Haven's modest banquet room held the same collection of people it always did: extended relatives, neighbors who pretended to be insiders, and my father's co-workers who treated him more as entertainment than peer. No surprise in their eyes. They had witnessed scenes like this before. My arrival had been unremarkable. I walked in 5 minutes before the dinner began, wearing a navy sweater, dark trousers, and the kind of expression that discouraged questions. The coat slipped from my shoulders as I stepped inside. Nothing about me signaled tension, yet Colin lifted the invitation the moment he saw me, as if he had been waiting to deliver his moment. The paper tore cleanly, no hesitation in his hands. Each half drifted toward the white tablecloth with the quiet finality of a verdict. Behind him, a cluster of relatives leaned forward, eager for the next line. My father laughed first. "She chose the wrong field," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. His voice did not lower. Humiliation sounded casual, coming from him, almost reflexive. Aunt Carol whispered something into another ear. The response arrived in the form of a stifled chuckle. My mother observed the scene with detached approval, her gaze sliding over me like I was an object placed slightly out of alignment. "She struggles with rent," she added, as if reciting a fact from a ledger. "Maybe losing that invitation will teach her something." Metal scraped against the floor when someone pulled out a chair for me. My usual seat waited positioned at the end of the table, far from the center conversations, close enough to fetch things if needed. I remained standing. My father's brow tightened. "Lena, sit. Don't turn this into theater." Silence pressed against my eardrums. Speaking would have validated his accusation. Defending myself would have confirmed his script. Words had never changed anything in this family. No one at the table knew the truth behind my job title. Clarifying it would have been pointless. They never shaped their narratives around accuracy. Their focus was control. Instead of looking at me, my father gestured toward Colin with the enthusiasm of a man presenting a trophy. "This one's doing well at Hartwell," he said, pride sharpening his voice. "The company has real plans for him." Colin held his chin slightly higher, as if the recognition belonged to him alone. My mother folded her napkin with deliberate gentleness. "Lena still hasn't found her place," she said. "There's time, I suppose." A silent blockage locked my throat. I stood there feeling every microaggression of the past accumulate into a solitary, heavy stone. It pressed against my ribcage, invisible to them yet utterly suffocating to me. The door opened. Breaths shortened across the room. Chairs straightened. Even the soundscape shifted. Richard Conway stepped inside the new division head my father had spoken about for weeks. His expression remained controlled, the kind executives wear when they expect nothing notable to happen. His eyes scanned the faces, present one by one. Recognition halted his search. He said my name. "Lena." His tone didn't rise. His posture didn't change. Yet the simplicity of the acknowledgement cracked the room's arrangement. The temperature seemed to drop. My mother lowered her gaze. Colin's smirk vanished. My father sat rigid and unblinking. Richard approached with quiet purpose, dismissing the rest of the table with a single bypassed glance. "I didn't know you'd be here tonight," he said calmly, his focus fixed on me with an ease that suggested familiarity rather than surprise. A strained sound escaped my father. "You know my daughter." Richard's response came without hesitation. "Of course." His attention returned to me. "Are we still meeting Wednesday?" The updated compliance structure needs your revisions before the board session." His voice carried the clipped precision of someone balancing authority and expectation. A fork slipped from someone's hand and struck the floor, its metallic clang carving through the stillness. My father's lips parted, then closed again. Confusion clouded his features. "Board." Richard continued, uninterested in the surrounding shock. "You received my message," he asked. "The shortlist review," I answered. "Yes." A faint approving nod formed. "Good. Your assessment will be decisive." My mother's fingers trembled around her glass. The napkin beneath Colin's hand wrinkled. My father attempted another question. "Lena." "Works with you?" Richard turned his head. "She advises our team," he said. "Her work has accelerated the integration more than anything else this quarter. We wouldn't be where we are without her." A hush replaced all remaining noise. Movement stalled. The table's hierarchy warped in an instant. Aunt Carol shifted back in her chair. Colin's jaw tightened. My mother's knuckles paled. Richard added one final detail. Her analysis saved us months during the compliance overhaul. His voice remained steady, unembellished. Nothing theatrical, just fact, delivered with corporate efficiency. None of them spoke. Richard offered me a brief nod, clean and professional. "I'll see you Wednesday." The door closed behind him. Stillness lingered like fog. I looked down at the torn invitation resting near my feet. The halves carried no meaning now. I bent, picked them up, and set them gently on the table, the gesture quieter than any accusation. My voice didn't rise. I'm not the one who should feel embarrassed tonight. Nothing met my statement. No argument, no denial, no attempt to mend what had been torn. Their silence held more truth than their words ever had. A shift had begun. Returning to the previous order would be impossible. The room no longer held the power it once claimed. Tension settled over the table with a density that felt almost physical. Conversations thinned until they became nothing more than faint background murmurs. Every gaze shifted toward me with the uneasy fascination people reserve for revelations they never expected. My father pushed grains of rice across his plate, pretending to focus on his meal while clearly replaying each word Richard had delivered. My mother's spoon circled her soup again and again long after the surface had cooled. Colin stared at the tablecloth, studying the pattern, as if the fabric held instructions for escape. I remained still. The quiet worked on my behalf, carrying the weight I didn't need to vocalize. For once, truth didn't require effort. It had already carved its place. Aunt Carol lifted her wrist toward the chandelier, angling her bracelet as an excuse to evaluate me. The gesture failed to disguise her curiosity. My mother noticed and stiffened her shoulders, attempting to regain composure. She had never truly lost, but no longer owned. With an artificial brightness, her voice entered the silence. "You never mentioned you work with Mr. Conway." My fork halted in midair. "That was never your question." A small tremor tightened the corner of her mouth. Whatever response she had prepared vanished. A comment like that once would have pierced me. Now it barely brushed the surface. My father inhaled sharply. He tried to reclaim authority, saying, "You should have told us. Why keep something like that from your family?" I set my fork down with measured precision. Information isn't hidden when people refuse to listen. A faint flush crept into his neck. "We listen," he insisted. A quiet breath eased from my chest. "Do you?" No rebuttal formed. Colin's attention sank deeper into the tablecloth. My mother dabbed at her lips with her napkin, unable to mask the sting. Grasping for the familiar role, my father attempted a pivot. "We want you to succeed, Lena. Your decisions often concern us." My eyes met him without hesitation. "That is the version of me you maintain, the one that keeps your story intact." Mom's composure faltered. A brief, almost invisible wince crossed her features. The waitstaff entered the room with polished trays, unaware that they had stepped into a battlefield disguised as a dinner. Cream-filled pastries landed in front of each place setting. My father readjusted his tie as if the dessert had rescued him. My aunt smiled too broadly, desperate for normalcy. I left my plate untouched. Adrenaline dulled everything else. My mother reached for a gentler tone. "Of course we think you're capable, darling. You've always just been so quiet, difficult to read." My father cut in quickly. He clarified his position, stating, "What she means is that you never established stability, not in a way we could understand." The metallic tap of my fork against porcelain signaled the end of my patience. "You declared me unstable because it preserved your comfort," I said evenly. "It allowed you to measure success by a scale that excluded me." He frowned. "That isn't fair." "It's accurate," I replied. "Every attempt to explain my work was dismissed. Every milestone was downgraded to coincidence. Every accomplishment became invisible the moment it threatened your expectations." Colin exhaled sharply, barely concealing his irritation. "It's never that deep, Lena." The ice in my voice carried no hostility. "Then why tear up my invitation?" His expression cracked. Whatever confidence he had evaporated, words refused to form. He glanced around the table, the panic in his eyes undeniable. My father's attention snapped toward him. A sharp tone cut through the air. "Why did you do that?" "Colin." A flush crept up my brother's neck. He searched the room for an ally. None appeared. "I thought it was one of those events where you wouldn't belong." "Belong," I repeated without raising my voice. "Among people who understand their field." He had no reply. Aunt Carol attempted a lifeline. "Well, maybe everything was just a misunderstanding." My gaze shifted toward her. "Is that how you describe laughing at me before the evening even started?" A ripple of color spread across her cheeks. She reached for her water glass as if hydration might save her. Mom intervened. "It's not personal. Families tease." Calm replaced every old instinct to shrink. Families inquire. They support. They stay curious. Teasing begins when respect ends. My father's patience thinned. Authority had always been his weapon. Tonight it felt dulled. "What do you want from us?" he snapped. "An apology." My eyes didn't move from his. "Understanding," I said quietly. "That's all." Another silence unfolded, sharper, heavier, harder to ignore. The muted piano drifting from the restaurant beyond the door created a strange contrast, almost mocking the stillness inside the room. A flicker crossed my mother's face, uncertain, calculated or remorseful. The emotion lacked clarity. Her hand edged toward mine, stopping short of contact. "Lena, we never knew. You didn't share any of this." "I tried," I said. "You preferred the simpler story, the one where Colin performs and I disappoint." My father stiffened. "That narrative is absurd." One eyebrow lifted slightly. "You highlight his achievements. You recite his promotions word for word. My work barely receives a nod." Mom stared at the polished table, unable to craft a denial. My father sat taller, reaching instinctively for control. "Now that things are clearer, we can start from scratch." A muted ache spread through me, heavier than irritation. "So now I matter because someone you admire validated me." His silence confirmed what he wouldn't say aloud. A long stretch of quiet rearranged the room. Nothing broke the moment until my purse vibrated. I retrieved my phone without urgency. A message from Richard appeared. "Thank you for handling that with restraint. See you Wednesday. The board values your work." The screen glowed. The name glowed harder. I slid the phone away. No explanation followed. None was required. They had seen enough. My father exhaled slowly, realization reshaping his posture. Resonance replaced denial. The truth had become too large to shrink. My aunt leaned closer to my mother. "She works with the board," she whispered, too loudly, too astonished. The word board altered the atmosphere. My mother leaned forward. "Lena, how could you keep something like that from us?" My fingers closed around the strap of my purse. "You settled on who I was long before I had the chance to describe anything else." Colin swallowed. "So what exactly do you—" My voice remained level. "I build structures you've never bothered to understand." His shoulders tensed. Honesty rarely strikes loudly. Sometimes it strikes clean. The remainder of the dinner unfolded with the stiffness of a rehearsal gone wrong. Questions dried up. Curiosity replaced judgment. No one dared say more. I rose from my chair first. No objections surfaced. No ridicule trailed behind me. No demand pulled me back. My coat rested over the back of the chair. I slid my arms into the sleeves and tightened the collar. My father's voice followed, not loud, not commanding, but strained. "We'd like to see you again. Soon. I turned slightly. Maybe I said, if you're ready to see me clearly. Then the door opened, and the night air greeted me with a chill sharper than anything inside that room. The sky above New Haven looked cleaner than it had an hour ago. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was leaving them. They were the ones left sitting in a story no longer written for them. When I stepped into the banquet hall earlier that evening, I knew exactly what I was walking into. My parents hosted the New Year dinner every January 1st with the same guest list, executives my father wanted to impress neighbors, my mother wanted to outperform, and relatives who showed up mostly to compare careers and bank accounts. I had prepared myself for the usual glances, the polite questions, the subtle jabs. What I did not expect was how easily everyone accepted the story my family told about me. Quietly, I navigated the room, offering polite smiles. No one approached me first. They waited for context, for someone to define me before they engaged. My mother provided that context immediately. "That is our daughter," she told a woman in a sequined navy dress. "She's still figuring things out." I heard it even though she said it softly. The woman nodded kindly. It must be hard at that age without something solid. My mother sighed as if she carried the weight of my supposed instability. "We are hoping she settles soon. Her brother is doing wonderfully at Hartwell, of course." I turned away before they saw my expression. I found my seat at a smaller table set to the side, away from the cluster of guests with titles and influence. My place card sat between a retired couple who barely remembered meeting me last year and a cousin who had once asked if I had ever considered going back to school so you can get a real job. The cousin gave me a sympathetic smile as I sat. "You look tired," she said. "Job hunting, right?" I forced a small smile. "Something like that." She nodded knowingly, satisfied she had guessed correctly. No further questions. Across the room, my father laughed uproariously at a joke told by one of his colleagues. He looked relaxed, confident, exactly the man he became when surrounded by people who validated his view of the world. My brother stood beside him, a glass of champagne in hand, gesturing enthusiastically as he told a story about his latest project. The men around him listened impressed. My father's pride was visible from across the room. When he noticed me, he lifted his glass in a vague gesture that could have been acknowledgement or dismissal. It was always hard to tell. I excused myself from the table and walked toward the refreshment area. As I reached for a glass of water, two men standing nearby continued their conversation without lowering their voices. "She is the daughter, right?" one asked. "The one without a job," the other replied. "Thought so. Heard she moved back home." "She did. Full house over there. Her brother is doing all the heavy lifting." They laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that stings more because it is casual. I kept my posture steady and my face neutral, but my chest tightened. I wondered how long these assumptions had been circulating. How many times had my family offered this version of me to preserve the image they wanted? A moment later, my aunt approached. She spoke in a lowered voice, giving me a look that attempted sympathy but landed closer to condescension. "Lena, sweetie," she said, "I know things are a bit unstable right now, but keep your chin up. Not everyone finds success on the same timeline." I blinked. She continued as if giving a motivational speech she had memorized. "And do not feel embarrassed about being here tonight without accomplishments to announce. These things take time." My jaw tightened slightly. "I am not embarrassed." A patronizing hand patted my arm. "Of course you are not. You are being very brave." Brave. That word stuck in my throat. Before I could respond, my brother appeared behind her. "Mom wants everyone seated," he said. Then he looked at me, not unkindly, but with a hint of superiority that had grown sharper over the last few years. "Try to sit closer to the center tables. It will look better in the photographs." I raised an eyebrow. "Look better for who?" "For the guests," he said, "and for Mom and Dad. You know how optics matter at events like this." He said it like he was explaining something obvious to someone slow. My aunt nodded. "Your mother works very hard to maintain appearances, dear." Appearances. Always appearances. I returned to my table, but the small comments continued from different directions throughout the next 10 minutes. One voice asked, "You are between jobs now, right?" Another offered, "My niece's friend is hiring for an assistant position." "Have you thought about temp work?"
It is good experience for people still building resumes. When will you find a respectable husband? It must be hard at your age to be so unattached. Do not worry, honey. We all know some people struggle with direction for a while.
Each sentence landed like a soft but insistent tap, slowly pushing me back into the role they wanted me to fill, a role I had outgrown years ago. Then came the moment that solidified everything. The group photo. Every year before dinner, my father organized a formal family picture. Guests watched. He enjoyed the attention. The photographer positioned everyone meticulously. My father stood at the center, my mother at his side, my brother next to them. I approached by instinct as I always had. But this time when I stepped forward, my father paused. He looked at me, then looked at the photographer. "Let us do the main family first," he said. The photographer nodded as if it were standard instruction. I froze. The main family. My brother looked uncomfortable for half a second, but said nothing. My mother placed a hand on my father's arm. "Robert?" He waved her off. "We will take a second photo with everyone else. This is just for the announcement slideshow." Announcement. He meant the slideshow celebrating my brother's promotion at Hartwell, the one they had planned for after dessert. I stepped back, not because I agreed, but because there was no point in pushing myself into a frame where I was not wanted. As the flash went off, guests clapped lightly. The image of the main family projected itself across the room for everyone to absorb. My phone buzzed in my purse. I did not check it. The second photo happened quickly, less formally, less carefully posed. I stood at the edge, barely included. When it was done, no one looked at me. Dinner was served soon after. The seating arrangement mirrored the same hierarchy. My brother sat at the main table with executives and their spouses. My parents sat with the hosts of the other corporate families. I sat at a side table again. Halfway through the meal, one of my father's colleagues leaned toward him and asked, "Your daughter is the one at the corner table, right? What does she do again?" My father's answer was immediate, rehearsed. "She is still at the junior level, has not figured out her path. But she is trying. Trying." That word hit harder than anything else. My father continued, "She has trouble holding down consistent work. That is why we help her sometimes." Several heads around the table nodded sympathetically, believing it completely. He smiled as he spoke, proud of his narrative, unaware that I had been close enough to hear every word. My mother added, "She has always been careful with money, lives simply. Some people are like that." The colleague chuckled. "Well, at least she is not out spending recklessly." My brother joined in. "She cannot afford to. Rent alone would drown her." My fork paused midair. He said it like it was a joke, like my life was a talking point for entertainment. No one corrected him, no one softened it, no one wondered whether the person they were describing was actually sitting 30 feet away. In that moment, listening to the people who should have known me best discuss me like a burden, I realized something essential. They did not simply misunderstand me. They preferred the version that made them feel superior. They did not just overlook me. They needed me to stay small so they could stay comfortable. My father lifted his glass to make a toast about family unity. My mother dabbed her eyes, moved by his words. My brother beamed. I sat silently, my hands steady, even as my chest tightened. And for the first time in my life, I understood something completely and without hesitation. There was no point explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was. They did not forget who I was. They never knew. And they never tried. The moment dinner plates were cleared, the energy in the room shifted. It always did. Guests became bolder conversations, louder, everyone slightly tipsy on the combination of champagne and self-importance. This was the part of the night when people stopped filtering their opinions, especially my family. Standing near the back of the room, I refilled my water glass just as I heard my brother's voice rise above the murmurs. "Honestly, I do not know why she even comes to these things," he said. "She looks miserable every year." He was talking about me, again. A woman I vaguely recognized laughed softly. "She seems quiet. Maybe she prefers small gatherings." My brother shrugged. She has never been comfortable around successful people. I think it makes her insecure. They believe no environment seemed built for her. Colin replied, lowering his voice, but not enough. He continued, "She hops around from project to project. I do not think she has ever kept a job longer than 6 months." I closed my eyes for a brief second, letting the words settle without breaking me. They did not hurt like they used to. A cold, steady detachment replaced the old familiar pain. That feeling almost felt like clarity. My brother continued, oblivious. "She is smart, but not work smart. Not in a way companies actually need." I stepped back before anyone saw me. The room became a blur of glittering dresses, suits, glasses raised in fake celebration. The air felt heavier. Every whispered conversation seemed to orbit the same theme: who mattered, who did not, and why. I drifted toward the hallway leading to the coat room, wanting a moment alone, but I did not make it far. My mother intercepted me at the entrance. "There you are," she said, smiling too brightly. "Do not wander off. People are going to think you are hiding." "I needed air," I said. She lowered her voice. "Please do not look gloomy. This dinner is important to your father. It reflects on all of us." Of course it did. Everything did. A cluster of guests approached, and my mother immediately switched into performance mode. "This is our daughter," she said, placing a gentle but firm hand on my arm, as if presenting an exhibit. "She is still finding her way." The man beside her offered a polite smile. "Nothing wrong with that. The world is unpredictable." My mother sighed dramatically. "She is very independent, almost too independent. She has always had trouble asking for help." I stared at her, stunned by the casual rewriting of history. She continued before I could respond. "We try to support her, but she likes to do things alone." Alone. The word jabbed in a way I did not expect. The group nodded, accepting her version of reality without question. My mother smiled satisfied, then gestured for them to follow her toward the dessert display. As she walked away, she squeezed my arm. "Try to smile more," she whispered. "People notice." I stood there for a moment, trying to steady myself, but then my father called my name from across the room. "Lena, come here for a second." I walked toward him slowly, already bracing for whatever version of me he had constructed for his audience. He stood with 3 men, all executives from his company. Their ties were loosened, their jackets undone. Their laughter filled the space around them. "This is my daughter," my father said proudly, "the one still getting her footing." One of the men chuckled. "We all have a child like that, late bloomers." My father grinned as if it were funny. "She is working on it." The other man raised his glass. "You are lucky she is still young, plenty of time to figure things out." I looked at my father. He avoided meeting my eyes. The men excused themselves to get more drinks, leaving us briefly alone. I expected my father to change his tone now that the audience was gone, but he did not. He adjusted his cufflinks. "Do not make that face, Lena. They do not need complicated explanations." I felt my throat tighten. "You could have said something else, like what he asked. You never tell us what you do. You never clarify anything." "I have tried." He shook his head. "Not in a way that makes sense, not in a way we can repeat without sounding foolish. So you choose the easiest version," I said quietly. "The version that embarrasses me." He frowned, irritated. "You are too sensitive. This is how networking works. Nobody wants a long story." It was astonishing how casually he dismissed me, as if my life existed only in relation to his reputation. Before I could reply, my brother joined us again, still carrying his champagne glass. "We are about to show the slideshow," he said, "the one with my promotion announcement. Can you sit with the family so it looks cohesive?" I stared at him. Why would I want to sit there? He looked confused. "Because it is family." I let out a quiet, humorless breath. "You told me half the room I cannot afford rent." He blinked. I was joking. "You were not." He looked to my father for support. My father crossed his arms. "Lena, do not ruin this evening. Please." The words translated clearly. I must behave. I must disappear. I must not challenge the narrative. I stepped back, needing space, but not fast enough to avoid another conversation drifting toward me. This time it was 2 cousins. "She does not look happy. She never does."
Do you think she will ever get her life together? Not if she keeps pretending she understands tech. Her brother says she barely passed her statistics classes. I inhaled sharply. That was not only untrue, it was something my brother knew was untrue. But it was convenient. It supported his version of our family hierarchy. I tried to walk away again, but a neighbor stopped me before I could escape. "I heard you are between jobs," she said gently. "If you ever want to volunteer at the community center, we always need hands. It might help you build confidence." Build confidence. Volunteer to gain direction. Find simple tasks. Every sentence chipped at the facade they had created for me, and yet none of them knew it was a facade. My family fed them the script, and they accepted it without question. A server passed by offering champagne. I took a glass even though I did not plan to drink it. My hands needed something to hold. As I moved to the edge of the room, I heard someone laugh loudly. It was my brother again. "She is not drinking," he said. "She cannot afford the calories." The men around him chuckled. He continued, "She is still living with our parents. At her age." My face stayed neutral, but inside something shifted. Not anger, not sadness. A clean, unmistakable break. It became unmistakably clear that nothing I had accomplished, no matter how significant, would ever matter to them unless someone with authority validated it first. They needed an external voice to rewrite the story they depended on. They needed someone they respected to dismantle the version of me they were so comfortable believing. And that moment was coming, faster than any of them realized, because at the exact second, my brother delivered another careless punchline about me. The main doors to the banquet hall opened again. A new wave of cold air swept into the room. Every head turned. I saw Richard Conway walk back in, flanked by two senior executives. My brother stopped mid-sentence. My father straightened instantly. My mother's face was drained of color. Richard scanned the room, ignoring the guests calling his name. He was looking for me. When his eyes found me, he lifted a hand slightly in acknowledgement. The room hushed. My family stared at me in a silence sharper than any words they had spoken. The reversal had already begun. They just did not know it yet. 3 years before that New Year dinner, I stood in a windowless conference room that smelled like stale coffee and fluorescent light, holding my resignation letter in both hands. The badge around my neck read Data Analyst 2, and the name of the hospital system I worked for glowed in blue above the doorway. It was not a bad job. It was not a glamorous job either. It was just safe. My manager, a tired man in his 50s, looked at the letter and then at me. "Are you sure about this, Lena?" he asked. "You have stability here, benefits, a ladder to climb." I swallowed. "Yes, I am sure." He sighed and leaned back in his chair. "You are one of the few people here who actually understands what the numbers mean. You could move up." "I know," I said, "but I also know what we are not doing." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I gestured vaguely toward the door, toward the hospital beyond it. "We are sitting on years of patient data, patterns, missed diagnoses, people who bounce between clinics without anyone connecting the dots. We have everything we need to do better, and we are not doing it." He shook his head. "That is above our pay grade." Exactly, I thought. That was the problem. I left that job with no promise of a new one. What I had instead was an idea, a stubborn belief, and a friend who was just reckless enough to build something with me. Her name was Lila. We met at a health data conference in Boston. While everyone else talked about systems and budgets, she wanted to talk about patients. About the older woman who had shown up in 3 emergency rooms in 1 year with chest pain and left without a cardiology referral because her symptoms never looked textbook. About the man in his 60s who went from doctor to doctor with vague complaints that never made it into a shared record. What if we could see across all of it, she had asked that day, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. Not the names, not the personal details, just the patterns. What if someone connected the visits, the lab values, the risk factors in one place, and used that to flag who was about to fall through the cracks? She looked at me like she already knew the answer. "You can build that," she said. I was not sure I could, But the idea refused to let go. We spent nights and weekends sketching on whiteboards in borrowed office rooms talking about privacy, security, consent. We did not want to build another predatory platform that treated patients like a product. We wanted to build a system that would help providers see the people they were missing, especially older patients, especially those who did not know how to advocate for themselves. We called it ClearPath. The pitch was simple: a health tech platform that sat between clinics, hospitals, and labs, pulling only the minimum necessary data, running it through evidence-based algorithms, and sending alerts back to providers when a patient's pattern suggested elevated risk. Early heart failure, silent atrial fibrillation, medication conflicts, worsening chronic disease. We spent months working without pay. We lived on savings and cheap food. I took contract work on the side, cleaning old databases for clinics that did not care about what I wanted to build as long as their reports ran on time. Lila took part-time teaching work. The only constant was the whiteboard. There were nights when I sat cross-legged on the floor of our tiny office, surrounded by printouts, thinking, "This is ridiculous." I could have stayed. I could have climbed a safe ladder. I could have brought home a steady paycheck and never had to explain myself to anyone. Then I would remember a woman I met in the hospital cafeteria 2 years earlier. She had been in her late 60s, sitting alone with a folder of test results she did not understand. She had asked me, a stranger in a badge, if I knew what any of it meant. Her doctor had rushed out of the room after the appointment late for the next patient. "I do not want to be dramatic," she had said, trying to smile. "But I am scared." I had walked away that day, angry that no system existed to push people like her to the top of someone's list before it was too late. Those memories held me where fear would have pushed me back. Our first investor meetings were awful. Some smiled politely and told us to come back when we had more traction. Others asked inappropriate questions. One suggested we aim for a diet and wellness app instead. Another older man in a crisp navy suit leaned back in his chair and said, "I understand data. I understand business. But helping seniors avoid hospitalizations is not exactly a high-growth vertical." I left that meeting shaking. Lila squeezed my shoulder. "We are not building this for him. We scraped by. We built a prototype with a handful of clinics willing to experiment. We leaned hard into privacy. No names. No full charts. Only flagged patterns linked back to the providers who already had the relationships. A doctor would get a nudge. This patient has had 3 respiratory visits in 6 months. Consider further workup. A nurse would get a message. This medication combination has raised risk in similar cases. We watched what happened. An older woman got an early heart failure diagnosis because someone finally saw the pattern of her shortness of breath and swelling visits. A retired teacher had an arrhythmia caught before it caused a stroke. A woman in her late 50s with diabetes got a medication adjustment before her kidneys took permanent damage. Every time a provider called to say, "We would have missed this without your alert," something inside me settled. It was working. Our first big break came when a regional health network in the Midwest agreed to pilot ClearPath across all of its primary care clinics. They had read a quiet white paper we published and called us not the other way around. The chief medical officer, a woman in her early 60s, looked at me across a conference table in Chicago and said, "I have been waiting 20 years for someone to build this." The pilot went even better than we expected. Within 6 months, the network saw fewer avoidable hospitalizations among older patients, better chronic disease control, and higher satisfaction scores. The numbers were the kind that made executives pay attention. That was when Hartwell entered the picture. Hartwell was a large, well-known health conglomerate. I had heard of them for years. I never planned on working with them. I thought we were too small to matter to them. I was wrong. Richard found us through the pilot data. When he first called, I thought it was a mistake. "This is Richard Conway from Hartwell," he said. "We have been reviewing some outcomes tied to your ClearPath platform. We should talk." Lila and I flew to New York for the meeting. We had no suits that matched the lobby. The building was all glass and stone and quiet power. I felt underdressed in my black blazer and sensible shoes, but once we walked into the conference room and the screen filled with our own data, all of that disappeared. They did not want to talk about branding. They wanted to talk about impact.
Richard sat at the head of the table, hands folded. "We have been trying to build something like this internally for 4 years," he said. "We failed. You did it with a team of 6. He asked questions that actually mattered. How did we handle consent? How did we ensure that alerts did not bias care against marginalized groups? How did we keep the algorithms transparent? We had answers not because we had prepared for his questions, but because we had built ClearPath with those principles from day one." 3 months later, Hartwell made an offer to acquire ClearPath outright. The number on the first term sheet made my hands shake. It was not a fantasy number. It was not lottery money. It was the kind of number that meant safety. That meant I could pay off every debt, take care of my own health, take care of my future, and never again have to stay somewhere that disrespected me to survive. We negotiated hard. Not for more cash, but for terms. We wanted control over how the platform would be used. No hidden data sharing, no quiet selling of patient patterns to third parties. We wanted an ethics council with teeth. We wanted to stay involved in decisions. Hartwell surprised me by saying yes to most of it. "I want this to be our reputation piece," Richard said. "The thing we point to when regulators, patients, and families ask what we are doing is actually responsible." When the deal closed, my stake converted into more money than anyone in my family had ever seen. I did not tell them. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew exactly how the conversation would go. People would call it luck instead of work. Questions about numbers would come before questions about me. My value would be tallied like a balance sheet. Every part of the journey that was not money would vanish from their view. So I kept living in my modest apartment. I kept driving my used car. I put the money into boring things: index funds, safe accounts, a retirement plan. I increased my giving to organizations that worked with older patients who had no advocates. I paid off my student loans quietly in one afternoon and then sat on my sofa staring at the zero balance, feeling something I had never felt before: freedom. Inside Hartwell, my role shifted. I was no longer the outsider building from scratch. I was the person they called when they needed someone to explain what ethical data use meant in the real world. I joined committees, internal boards, and strategy sessions. When Richard asked if I would consider a formal executive track, I hesitated. "You already act like a vice president," he said. "You may as well have the title." He put my name on the VP shortlist for health data strategy before the New Year dinner. My family did not know any of this. The long, silent hours building everything from scratch were invisible to them. Risks that could have ruined my entire future never crossed their minds. Patients who trusted me with their health existed far outside their awareness. What it took to negotiate the acquisition was beyond their imagination. My equity stake earned through years of sacrifice meant nothing in their eyes. The burden I carried daily was something they could not begin to comprehend. They saw only what they chose to see. A daughter who lived simply, who kept quiet, who did not perform success the way they understood it. They assumed that meant failure. I let them. For a while. Not because I enjoyed being underestimated, but because I finally understood something important. I did not need them to understand my life for it to be real. Their version of me was small. Mine was not. For the first time, I was starting to choose my own version over theirs. The office lights glowed a faint amber against the evening fog as I stepped inside, still replaying every word from the dinner in my mind. My family had reduced my entire life to a punchline over New Year dishes, but here in this quiet space at Horizon Link, I could finally breathe. I sat at my desk, opened the laptop, and pulled up the latest patient flow dashboard our engineers had pushed. The numbers reflected years of work sacrifice and sleepless nights that no one in my family had ever cared to understand. While they mocked me for being a junior employee, I was shaping the platform that would redefine national patient data logistics. As I scrolled through the charts, my thoughts drifted back to everything they would never know. The quiet efforts of designing the system were invisible to them, lost in their assumptions. Every risk I took to build the company from zero never crossed their minds. The commitment I made to patients whose lives shaped my purpose remained far outside their awareness. The long, silent struggle to protect my intellectual property during negotiations lived in a world far removed from their casual dinner judgments. My financial worth earned through relentless commitment meant nothing in their eyes. The weight I carried daily, the responsibility of a system that managed real human health outcomes, was beyond anything they could begin to imagine. Forrest's message popped onto my screen. "Did you get home safe?" I exhaled, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I am at the office," I typed back. "Could not sleep. Working." He responded with a simple, "I will come by. Stay there." I stared at the message, feeling a flicker of warmth cut through the frustration lodged in my chest. When Forrest arrived 20 minutes later, he carried 2 steaming paper cups from the cafe downstairs. No questions, no pity, just a quiet presence. He placed a cup beside me and leaned against the edge of my desk. "What happened?" he asked softly. I told him everything. Not the polished summary, the raw truth. The humiliation of watching my father tear up my invitation in front of everyone. My brother laughed as he mocked my finances. My mother parroting poor people must learn to save as if I were irresponsible and not someone investing in building a company that could one day change healthcare entirely. The jokes, the smirks, the way they devoured the idea of me being small. Forrest listened with a stillness that anchored me. No interruptions, no attempts to fix what was unfixable. Just focus. When I finished, he crossed his arms. "They are wrong," he said, matter of fact, not comforting, but stating a truth he expected me to accept. "But you already know that." I gave a weak smile. "It still hurts." He offered insight with genuine empathy. "Of course it does. Family cuts deeper than anyone else could. They think they know you because they knew who you were. They have no idea who you became." I looked down at my hands. "They think I have failed." Forrest exhaled slowly, "Then let them think about it. For now." Those words settled over me like a blanket. He was right. Silence was not weakness. Silence was strategy. I did not need to defend myself to those who had already decided what story they preferred. He pushed off the desk and walked over to the whiteboard. "Tell me what you are working on," he said, switching to work mode. "Let us put your mind somewhere productive." I nodded and pulled up the prototype screen. The new triage mapping model. It predicts patient data bottlenecks before they occur. "We tested it on 2 partner hospitals this morning." Forrest's eyes sharpened with interest. "Show me the results." For the next hour, we dove into the architecture, debating the best way to integrate cross-hospital interoperability without compromising data privacy. By the time we stepped back from the board, I felt lighter, the weight on my chest easing. Work grounded me. Work reminded me of who I was outside my family's narrow lens. He grabbed his coat and hesitated as we wrapped up. "Can I say something personal?" he asked. I nodded. "You understand that the acquisition is not just business. Your presence matters. The way you treat patients, the ethics you insist on, the way you want the platform to serve people, not profits. Older donors trust you, especially women 55 and up. That demographic is incredibly hard to win." He took a slow breath. "Your empathy is the reason Horizon Link stands out." I blinked, heat touching my cheeks. "I do not know about all that." "I do," he said firmly. "You are the reason Helix bought us. Do you know how rare that is? Legacy donors see you even if your family refuses to." His words were steady, grounded, impossible to dismiss. At that moment, I wished I could believe my worth, the way he delivered it without hesitation. But old wounds do not vanish simply because the truth is spoken. "I wish they understood," I whispered. "Maybe one day," he said. "Or maybe never. Either way, your trajectory does not depend on their understanding." The elevator dinged softly outside the glass wall, a reminder that the world moved on even when I felt stuck between 2 versions of myself. When Forrest finally left, I remained alone with the hum of the server racks. I stared at the city lights through the window, each flicker reminding me how much of my life existed far beyond my family's imagination. My family had dismissed everything I had done. They had erased the nights I coded alone, eating instant noodles because groceries were a luxury. They had never seen the morning I woke up unable to pay rent because I had poured everything into our product. They never knew how many times I sat with real patients in real hospital rooms listening to what the system had failed to give them. They did not witness the meetings where we begged for funding. They had no idea what it meant to negotiate with investors who underestimated me before they even heard me speak. They would never understand how close we were to losing everything before our final breakthrough. All they saw was junior employee and cannot afford rent. All they cared about was the version of me that made them feel superior. I shut my laptop. A different kind of certainty rose in my chest. The New Year dinner would not be the last time they saw me. The next time would be unforgettable. The moment their new boss said my name, the story they clung to would crumble. The reversal would not be loud. It would be undeniable. I turned off the office lights and walked into the cold night ready. The documents lay open on the conference table, a stack of crisp pages stamped with Helix Global's blue insignia. I stared at them, the weight of what they represented settling slowly into my chest. This was no longer a conversation about a potential acquisition. It was a commitment emerging of futures that would tie Horizon Link and my life's work to one of the largest healthcare conglomerates in the country. Forrest had insisted I be present for every discussion, every clause, every negotiation, because none of it made sense without me. "Shall we start?" he asked, sliding a chair close to mine. "I am set," I answered, my voice steadying even as a faint shake lingered inside me. Helix Global's delegation entered, led by a woman with striking silver hair and a navy suit sharper than any blade. Evelyn Grant, Chief Executive Officer of Helix, known in every industry as the woman who rebuilt the world's largest patient data network from the ground up after the 2017 breach. Her reputation intimidated entire boardrooms, but she smiled at me the moment her eyes landed on my face. "Lena Ward," she said warmly, "it is good to finally meet you in person." The Forest stood. "This is the co-founder of Horizon Link," he said with a confidence that made the room shift subtly in my direction. "None of this exists without her." Evelyn extended her hand. "I know. Your design for patient flow architecture is the most elegant I have seen in a decade." My breath caught, but I shook her hand firmly. "Thank you. That means a lot." "It should," she said, "because there are only two women whose work I have described that way. Myself, and now you." The room went silent. Even the Helix attorneys blinked. We took our seats. Evelyn gestured to the documents. "Our objective is simple. Horizon Link will become the primary patient data optimization branch under Helix. We will scale your platform across all 214 partner hospitals nationwide. We intend for you to stay on as Chief Integration Officer." I looked up sharply. "Chief Integration Officer?" "Yes," she said. "We need someone who understands patients' ethics and technical architecture, not someone who only sees numbers. Especially for the demographic that trusts you most, women 55 and older. They are our largest donor base. They feel safe with you. Safe. My family had never seen me through that lens. My work, however, had carved that truth into reality." Evelyn continued, "I am offering you a 5-year contract. You will oversee patient data expansion and community implementation. Your voice will shape the future of our platform." My throat tightened. "I appreciate it." I managed my hands steady only because I held them together. Then Evelyn slid a page toward me. "This includes your equity valuation." My eyes scanned the numbers. I blinked, read them again, and again. "This cannot be right," I whispered. "It is," Evelyn said calmly. 41% of Horizon Link shares at current valuation. Your stake is substantial." She paused, and deserved it. The figures stunned me, not because I had never dreamed of financial security, but because the value was a mirror reflecting everything my family refused to see. Those endless hours when exhaustion blurred into determination never registered for them. Every gamble that could have emptied my life savings stayed invisible. The stories I carried from patients who trusted me with their pain were distant from their world. What it took to sit across a table and protect my work during the acquisition went unnoticed. The responsibility of raising something from zero rested entirely on shoulders they never thought I had. Forrest leaned closer. "You earned every decimal." My chest tightened. "This changes everything." "Exactly," Evelyn said. "And we want this partnership because of who you are, not despite it." The negotiations began in earnest. Helix's legal team dissected every clause. Forrest countered their points with calculated precision. I examined the ethical compliance sections, tightening the language around patient consent and data transparency. Evelyn watched me with quiet approval, occasionally stepping in to support a clause I pushed for. Hours passed, coffee cooled, the sun dipped below the Seattle skyline. At one point, Evelyn closed her folder and addressed the whole table. "Let me be perfectly clear," she said. "This acquisition only works if Lena remains in leadership. Horizon Link without her is just code and hardware. Horizon Link with her is a movement." A murmur moved through the delegation. I swallowed pressure prickling behind my eyes. No one in my family had ever spoken about me with even a fraction of that respect. When the final page was reviewed, Evelyn folded her hands. "We have 2 final matters to discuss," she said, "both concerning you, Lena." My pulse spiked. "What matters?" "First," she said, "we want to announce the acquisition at a formal event on January 10th, the same night Helix hosts its annual New Year Health Tech Gala. Every major donor will be present." The gala. The forest echoed. "That is perfect." A familiar ache rose in my chest. January 10th, the same date as the dinner my family had weaponized to shame me. Evelyn smiled knowingly. "Yes, this will be the largest event of the year, and I intend to make it unmistakably clear who is responsible for Horizon Link's success." I inhaled slowly. "And the second matter," Evelyn tapped her pen on the table. "Helix's new Seattle division begins next week. Your family's new boss, Theodore Vance, will attend the gala with me." My breath froze. My family had spent the entire New Year dinner bragging about Theodore Vance as if he were royalty descending from the heavens to bless their mediocre careers. Evelyn continued, "He reviewed your portfolio last month before meeting your brother. He asked specifically to meet the Horizon Link architect." She smirked. "He was impressed." Forrest's eyebrows rose. "He has no idea she is the same junior employee they mentioned." "None," Evelyn said. "And I think the reveal will be clarifying." A quiet shock moved through my chest. This was not about revenge. It was not about proving a point. It was simply the outcome that had always been waiting. Evelyn's voice softened. "I know what it is like to grow up in a family that misunderstands ambition. You are not the first woman I have seen rise in spite of it." I met her gaze. Strong, steady, true. "What do you want me to do at the gala?" I asked. Evelyn smiled. "Walk onto that stage when I call your name. Accept your position publicly, and allow the facts to speak for themselves." The sound of my name and her voice shifted the entire room. Recognition lit in Theodore Vance's eyes as he connected who I truly was. Understanding finally struck my family as they saw the strength behind everything they had dismissed. My future unfolded like a quiet, unstoppable wave. Across the table, the lead attorney flipped the final page toward me. Lena Forrest said softly, "We are ready for your signature." I picked up the pen. My hand hovered. I didn't doubt the contract. I finally understood the magnitude of it. Luck had nothing to do with it. Miracles played no part in this outcome. Chance never shaped the path I walked. Every inch of progress came from effort I carried without witnesses. I signed my name with a steady hand. Forrest exhaled. Evelyn nodded in satisfaction. The attorneys gathered their documents. The deal was sealed. As we stood, Evelyn touched my arm lightly. "Prepare yourself, Lena. The world will see you differently after this." I nodded. "So will my family." Her smile deepened. "Especially them." When the elevator doors closed behind us, I finally allowed myself the smallest, softest truth. The reversal had already begun. The restaurant buzzed with early evening chatter as I stepped inside. Warm lights glowed against polished wood, masking the sharp tension I felt building in my chest. My family had chosen this place for the New Year dinner every year, and the private room in the back always carried the same heaviness. Not nostalgia, expectation, judgment.
tradition disguised as closeness. My father sat at the head of the table scanning the wine list with the practiced posture of someone performing authority. My mother adjusted her gold chain, whispering something into his ear. Colin dominated the conversation with a loud laugh, clearly entertaining a coworker I had never met. The moment I entered, their expressions shifted surprise, calculation, and a touch of annoyance that I had arrived on time. My mother motioned toward an empty chair. "We are ready to order now," she said, polite but clipped. Colin nodded toward his coworker. "This is the sister I mentioned earlier," he said, tone light but dismissive. "The one still in junior operations." His coworker let his gaze trail over me without subtlety. "Got it." My father offered no correction. I took my seat without reacting. Dinner began with predictable commentary, Colin praising his own team performance metrics, my father nodding along with pride, my mother chiming in with anecdotes about church friends impressed by Colin's trajectory. Nothing about their tone surprised me. They carried on as if my existence served only to accent their accomplishments. Conversation moved smoothly until Colin lifted his glass. "Here is to grow," he said cheerfully. His eyes landed on me, especially for those still trying to get their footing. The corner of my mouth lifted. "Firm footing depends on the ground you choose," I replied. He chuckled, assuming victory where none existed. "Cute." The waiter approached. I opened my menu, but Colin interjected before I could speak. "She will take the lowest-priced entree," he said confidently, trying to keep her budget on track. I closed the menu slowly. "I can speak for myself," he shrugged. "Just trying to help." The coworker smirked. My father continued reading the wine list as if nothing happened. My mother did not raise her eyes. Moments later, my father cleared his throat, shifting into a tone he saved for constructive criticism. "Your mother and I have concerns," he began. "You need direction. You are 32. At your age, people should have financial security, investments, a plan." My mother folded her napkin carefully. "Saving is important, sweetheart. You cannot ignore the future." Colin leaned in, voice dripping condescension. "She panics about the rent every month. That is why she is so tense. The rent is handled," I said calmly. "Nobody said it was not," he replied, pretending innocence. The entire table seemed committed to the narrative they had crafted. They had decided who I was and refused to consider anything beyond it. My father shifted topics, eager to return to praise. "Colin received an email from Mr. Vance today. Leadership potential. That is the phrase he used." Colin's posture straightened as if crowned. "He said I could be management material in a few years." My mother raised her glass toward him. "We are so proud." Their pride hung in the room like thick perfume. My mother glanced at me afterward, her expression small and pitiful. She offered faint sympathy. "You will find your place in time. Not everyone moves at the same pace." A reply rose in my throat, but I swallowed it. Their image of me depended on my silence. Colin shifted his attention back to me. He initiated a new jab. "Speaking of progress, what about that invitation?" My pulse tightened. "What invitation?" "The Helix New Year dinner." He answered, grinning. "They did not have enough space this year, mostly senior staff and people who matter. Dad said it might feel uncomfortable for you." My father nodded. "You would not know anyone anyway," my mother added softly. "And it would only make you compare yourself. Let us keep this year easy." Colin's coworker raised his brows. "Yeah, those events are intense. Probably better this way." The words landed with the precision of small intentional cuts, yet none of them reached the truth. Their exclusive event was the same one where Helix planned to introduce Horizon Link to the National Healthcare Network, the same night Evelyn Grant would announce the acquisition, the same stage where I would stand beside the executive board, the same room where leaders from 200 hospitals would gather. None of that belonged in this conversation. Not yet. The dinner moved on with familiar rhythms, my father offering advice he assumed I needed, my mother sympathizing with struggles she invented, Colin bragging about upcoming workflow reviews. They filled the space with a story where he rose and I stalled. I maintained my composure, refusing to contort myself into their narrative. Colin lifted his phone at the end of the meal. A photo of the Helix building glowed on his screen. "See this," he said proudly. "That is the headquarters. One day I will have an office there."
His coworker clapped him on the back. "Keep pushing. You are close." My mother looked at me with gentle pity again. My father nodded with certainty. Colin beamed. None of them had the slightest idea that Helix leadership had already reviewed my architectural frameworks months earlier, long before they met him. None of them knew that Theodore Vance had evaluated my work in detail before interviewing Colin for his entry-level position. None of them imagined that the person they were gently guiding through career advice was preparing to join the executive rollout of a multi-state patient data program. Their version of success only existed if I stayed beneath them. I slipped my coat over my shoulders, ignoring Colin's attempt to offer commentary on how consistency creates opportunity. Outside the restaurant, cold air wrapped around me like relief. Streetlights reflected on the damp pavement, and my breath formed thin clouds in the winter darkness. My phone vibrated. A new message glowed on the screen. "Contract completed. Evelyn expects you at the gala stage for the announcement. January 10th, 8 o'clock. A slow calm spread through my chest. Their dismissal did not bruise me anymore. Their assumptions no longer shaped my identity. Their small version of my life could not touch the truth. The moment the announcement was made, their entire narrative would unravel effortlessly, naturally, without my interference. My steps carried me down the quiet street, steady and sure. Everything was already shifting. The entrance hall of the Helix New Year Gala shimmered under crystal chandeliers, each light reflecting off polished metal, like a constellation rearranged into order. Guests in tailored suits and floor-length gowns drifted through the space with the quiet confidence of people accustomed to influence. I stepped inside with a steady breath, the soft rustle of my navy dress blending into the room's understated symphony. My appearance signaled nothing of my power. I preferred it that way. A staff member handed me a name badge enclosed in a simple silver frame. Lena Ward, Integration Lead, Horizon Link. That title contained more truth than my family had allowed for years. Forrest emerged from a cluster of executives, waving me over with a genuine smile. "Perfect timing," he said, offering his arm as if guiding me onto a stage. "Evelyn wants to brief us before the announcement." We crossed the main hall together, weaving through donors, partners, physicians, and policy leaders. The energy carried a certain anticipation mixed with strategy, the kind of atmosphere where a single introduction could alter a career. For most people in this room tonight meant politics. My presence carried something far more personal. Evelyn waited near the backstage corridor, her posture calm and commanding. "You look composed," she said warmly. "Prepared," I replied. "Good," she added. "The moment you step out there, the narrative becomes permanent." A quiet flutter moved through my chest, not from fear, but from recognition. Tonight's reveal would erase years of misjudgment without a word spoken directly to the people who created that wound. No confrontation. No explanation. Truth stood at full height. Evelyn handed me a folded sheet. "Here is the order," she explained. "I will open with the expansion strategy, then introduce the acquisition, and finally bring you on stage. Theodore will acknowledge the new integration lead afterward." My pulse quickened at the mention of Theodore Vance. He was not just Colin's boss. He was the executive my family idolized at dinner, as if he walked on a level of ground none of them would ever reach. Hearing him speak my name tonight would shift their understanding in seconds. A coordinator signaled Evelyn. She moved toward the stage entrance heels, tapping against the polished floor with purpose. Forrest and I waited behind the curtain, listening to the opening remarks echo through the grand hall. "Helix Global is entering a new era," Evelyn announced. "Tonight we share a partnership that will redefine national patient data integration." Applause filled the room, strong and immediate. She continued, "A breakthrough platform has proven its worth across multiple pilot regions. This technology improved early detection rates for older adults, reduced avoidable hospitalizations, and strengthened continuity of care for seniors who often slip through the cracks. This platform is Horizon Link." The crowd responded with even louder enthusiasm. My heart beat steadily, not fast, not slow, simply certain. Evelyn's voice shifted into something more personal. "We seldom encounter innovations built with equal parts technical skill and ethical commitment. Horizon Link stands apart because it was designed by someone who placed patients first, especially older adults who often feel invisible in modern healthcare. A hush fell over the hall, the kind of stillness only respect can summon. She extended her hand toward the curtain. "Please welcome the architect of Horizon Link, Lena Ward." Stage lights poured over me the moment I stepped forward. Conversation froze mid-breath. Faces turned, eyes widened. Not because of the dress or the spotlight, but because my name carried a weight that traveled further than anything my family had ever imagined. Evelyn greeted me with a firm handshake infused with pride. "Thank you for trusting this work," she said quietly. The applause swelled, filling every corner of the ballroom. I scanned the room, not looking for my family, but acknowledging the gravity of the moment. Several hospital directors nodded in recognition. A few donors stood. A cluster of community advocates smiled warmly. Older women, patients, caregivers, leaders lifted their glasses as if claiming me as their own. Forrest joined us on stage to stand beside the display screen. Evelyn spoke again. "Horizon Link will become the core of Helix's integration strategy. To lead this transformation, we are establishing a new executive division. Tonight, we formally introduce our Chief Integration Officer." I glanced at the Forrest. His expression radiated encouragement. Evelyn turned slightly toward me. "Lena will hold that title effective immediately." A wave of murmurs rippled through the audience, surprise, respect, admiration. The sound settled into the air like a shifting tide. The next segment belonged to Theodore. Helix's newest regional head stepped onto the stage with measured strides. His presence carried authority without arrogance, the kind of steady demeanor that earned loyalty rather than demanded it. He positioned himself behind the podium, flipped to the final page of his notes, and looked directly at me. "I reviewed Horizon Link's framework before meeting my Seattle team," he said. "The design impressed me more than I can express. The architecture showed clarity, precision, empathy. I expected the creator to be a veteran in the field, someone decades into their career. Instead, I learned the truth tonight." His pause sharpened the atmosphere. "Lena, your work sets a new standard for the industry." A quiet gasp fluttered through the hall, followed by applause that built in layers. Theodore closed his folder. "I look forward to working closely with you. The Seattle division will follow your lead during implementation." That single sentence reshaped every false assumption my family had spoken at the dinner table. They had spent hours lecturing me about visibility and initiative, while the very man they idolized would now report directly to me on integration matters. Evelyn stepped to the podium again. "Thank you, Theodore. That concludes the formal announcement. We invite you all to join us in the reception hall to celebrate the beginning of this new chapter." As the audience rose, Forrest leaned toward me. "That was the moment," he whispered. "Everything just realigned." The reception hall buzzed with congratulations. Executives approached to express admiration for the platform. Physicians asked about implementation timelines. Community health advocates thanked me for designing a tool that considered vulnerable patients instead of just system efficiency. A retired nurse in her 60s touched my arm gently. "You built something that remembers people like me," she said. "Please do not lose that." Her words reached deeper than any applause. "I will not," I promised. Executives across the room lifted champagne flutes toward our team. Forrest carried himself with relaxed confidence, accepting every handshake with pride in his eyes. Evelyn spoke with senators and hospital representatives, redirecting each conversation toward the ethics behind our system. The energy in the room radiated momentum. Toward the edge of the crowd, I noticed Theodore speaking with a group of regional directors. He broke away and approached me with a respectful nod. "I misjudged the scope of Horizon Link," he admitted. "Seeing the full structure tonight changed my understanding." "Thank you," I replied. "The system exists because patients need something better." "You built exactly that," he said. "Seattle will benefit from this partnership. Your team will have my full support." His sincerity held no trace of the formality he used in meetings. This was acknowledgement pure and unfiltered. A quiet realization washed through me. My family had no influence here. Their opinions, judgments, and false assumptions had no place in rooms where work spoke louder than lineage.
The people who understood the stakes, the lives impacted the families, supported the seniors protected, stood in this room, not at that dinner table. The night pressed onward with speeches, music, and conversations that unfolded with genuine purpose. Every step confirmed the truth I had carried alone for too long. Work, built on integrity, can stand even when others underestimate the hands behind it. As the gala began to wind down, Forrest joined me near the balcony doors. "You handled everything with grace," he said. "Most people would have tried to make this about payback. You did not. It was never about them," I replied. The city lights stretched across the horizon, sparkling against the winter sky. A faint breeze reached us from the open balcony, carrying the scent of cold air and distant evergreen. The view felt quiet, expansive, and honest. Forrest rested his hand gently on the railing. "Your family will discover the truth soon enough." "They will," I said softly. "And the moment it happens, everything they built around me will collapse under its own weight." "Are you ready for that?" "Yes," I answered, steady. "More than ever." The festivities continued inside, but I remained on the balcony for another long breath, letting the night settle around me. The work I carried for years had finally stepped into the light. No confrontation required, no raised voice, no argument. Truth revealed at its own pace. Tomorrow would bring its own reckoning. My parents arrived at the gala reception 30 minutes after the announcement ended. The timing alone revealed everything. They expected Colin to greet them with stories of proximity to leadership. They expected their own importance to be acknowledged. They expected the night to reinforce the hierarchy they protected so fiercely. None of them expected their world to tilt the moment they walked through the door. My mother scanned the room first. Her eyes shimmered with anticipation as she clutched her small gold purse close to her ribs. She rose onto her toes as if searching for Colin among the crowd. My father lingered behind her with practiced confidence, assuming an invitation to a Helix event meant automatic respect. Colin walked between them with exaggerated ease, already rehearsing compliments he hoped to receive from Theodore Vance. Not one of them realized they had stepped directly into the celebration of my work. Evelyn approached the three of them before I had taken a step toward their end of the room. Her presence alone carried weight. Conversations quieted as she moved. Even senior physicians shifted aside to clear a path. "Welcome," she said smoothly. My father puffed his chest. "Thank you for including us," he replied, assuming credit that belonged nowhere near him. Evelyn offered a polite nod. "This is an important night for Helix," she said. "Our integration lead has delivered work that will influence national systems for years." My mother smiled tightly. "We heard something about a young woman speaking earlier." The room responded so warmly. "You will meet her momentarily," Evelyn said. Recognition had not struck them yet. The pause that followed felt like a drumbeat waiting for its cue. Colin stepped forward. "Is Mr. Vance still here? I would like to say hello if he has a moment." Evelyn shifted her attention to him with calm precision. "He is finishing a discussion with regional directors. Before you greet him, I would like you to meet someone else." My father straightened. "Of course." Evelyn turned and lifted her hand slightly, signaling me from across the room. A soft ripple spread through the crowd as I approached. People stepped back, making space. A few nodded with respect. Others smiled with the same warmth they offered when I presented the platform's architecture earlier. My mother watched each gesture with a puzzled expression, trying to make sense of the shift in attention. My father stopped breathing for a moment. Colin stared at me like I had appeared from a place he had never imagined. Evelyn delivered the introduction with steady clarity. "This is Lena Ward," she said, "the architect of Horizon Link." My mother blinked, lips parting slightly. My father's jaw clenched. Colin's face was drained of color. Silence thickened around us. Evelyn continued, "She will serve as Chief Integration Officer under Helix Global. Her leadership will guide the implementation for all 214 partner hospitals." My mother's hand trembled. "That cannot be." My father cut her off with a low, strained voice. "What position did you say Chief Integration Officer?" Evelyn repeated, unfazed. "Her design reshaped our strategic direction." Colin swallowed hard. "Lena, that is not... You never said anything." I met his eyes without flinching. "You never asked."
The first crack appeared in my father's composure. His eyes darted toward my badge, then back to my face, as if the words could rearrange themselves into something more digestible. My mother stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you hide this from us?" I drew a calm breath. Nothing was hidden. "You dismissed everything I tried to share." Her throat tightened. "We were trying to help you." "No," I answered steadily. "You were trying to fit me into the version of success that made sense to you." A murmur rose from nearby guests. They were not intruding, just witnessing. The truth carried its own gravity, and the space around us yielded to it. Evelyn spoke before my father could form another objection. "Your daughter's work is extraordinary. The accuracy of her architecture is unmatched in our field. She guided teams through challenges that would have broken most engineers, and she protected patient integrity at every step." My father lowered his gaze. My mother touched her necklace as if grounding herself. "We did not know." I held her eyes. "You never listened long enough to learn." Her breath hitched. Something fragile in her expression cracked under the weight of reality. Colin attempted to redirect the moment out of desperation. "Mr. Vance will be surprised to see her here," he said, forcing a laugh. "He already met her," Evelyn replied. The sentence landed with a clean, harsh elegance. Colin went rigid. What? Evelyn folded her hands. "He reviewed her portfolio months before he interviewed you. Tonight he publicly praised her work and outlined how his division will follow her lead." My brother staggered back a fraction of an inch. His confidence drained as quickly as his voice. My father looked between us, unable to anchor himself. "You outrank him?" "On integration matters," I said. My mother covered her mouth. The sound she made echoed more like realization than shock. Forrest stepped into the circle of silence without inserting himself into the tension. His nod toward my parents carried polite acknowledgement, but his presence served a clearer purpose confirmation. He stood beside me as an equal, not as support. That distinction made everything undeniable. The room around us shifted again, this time in my favor. Executives glanced over with interest. Community leaders recognized my name. Advocates for senior care raised their glasses in silent approval. My family observed it all. My father attempted to salvage dignity. "We are proud of you," he said stiffly. "Pride requires understanding," I replied. He exhaled as if bracing against a cold wind. "You should have told us." "I tried," I said. "You interrupted each attempt." A long, quiet pause spread between us. My mother stepped forward, eyes moist. "We judged you unfairly." Repeatedly, I answered. Her voice cracked. "We did not know you built something so meaningful." "You did not want to know," I said softly. Evelyn's steady presence anchored the moment. "Your daughter carries responsibility many executives twice her age cannot handle," she said. "She earned her position through discipline, not convenience." My father's shoulders lowered in defeat. Colin finally spoke, his voice faint. "What happens to me after this?" "That depends on your work," I said, unmoved by his panic. "Not on mine." He nodded slowly, unable to form a response. A coordinator approached, informing Evelyn the next group of donors was ready to meet us. She offered me a small nod. "I will see you out front," she said. Then she addressed my family with polite finality. "Thank you for attending." My parents stepped aside automatically. Forrest lingered beside me. "You handled that with more restraint than most people could manage." "They needed the truth," I said. "They got it," he replied. As we prepared to move toward the guests, my mother touched my wrist gently. "Can we talk later?" she asked. "Just us." Her request held vulnerability I had never seen from her. Forgiveness required time, not pressure. "I will think about it," I said. She nodded, understanding she had no right to demand more. My father whispered, "Congratulations," then added almost inaudibly, "We misjudged you." "That part is true," I said. Colin remained speechless, staring at the floor as if searching for a version of reality where he still outranked me. Conversations resumed behind us, the gala returning to its rhythm as if the room had exhaled. Forrest placed a hand on the railing, waiting for me to move. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. This time there was no tremor in my voice. The night had delivered its reckoning. No anger arrived. No spectacle unfolded. The truth stood steady, complete, and utterly undeniable. The morning unfolded with a quietness that felt strangely earned. Light spilled through my windows without urgency, giving the apartment a calm I had not felt in years. My laptop rested on the table beside a stack of documents I no longer needed to defend. For the first time, the silence around me reflected what I had built rather than what others assumed. Emails began to arrive in measured intervals. Senior directors requested follow-ups with an unmistakable degree of respect. Evelyn forwarded a briefing outline for the next integration phase, attaching a short note that acknowledged my leadership with unfiltered sincerity. Even Forrest's message carried an ease that suggested the landscape ahead had shifted into alignment rather than resistance. My family, however, formed a separate set of communications. My mother's voice filled my voicemail inbox before I finished breakfast. The tone wavered, uncertain, carrying questions she had avoided for years. She apologized without fully naming the offense, then apologized again for the vagueness itself. Her final message sounded more like a plea than a request. She wanted a chance to understand the woman she had overlooked. Another alert appeared with my father's number. He sounded composed at first, yet the tension beneath his calm surfaced quickly. The man who once lectured me about discipline now struggled to find a foothold in the conversation he recorded. Words like misjudgment and blind spots slipped into his attempt at grace. A subtle tremor edged through the last sentence, revealing more truth than he intended. Colin remained unseen until the evening. His message arrived without structure, almost frantic, packed with questions he had never asked when it mattered. He feared losing his position. He feared confirming every insecurity he had hidden behind arrogance. He feared my silence more than my success. Not a single line acknowledged what he had done to create the distance between us. The phone screen dimmed and I set it aside. A knock landed at my door 5 minutes later. Forrest stepped inside carrying 2 mugs of tea, the steam drifting upward in smooth spirals. He placed one on the counter, studying my expression with quiet curiosity. "You look like you are watching 2 worlds collide," he said. "Feels accurate," I answered. He moved to the couch, leaving space for whatever I needed to sort through. I joined him, holding the warm cup between my palms. "My family is trying to rewrite everything overnight," I said. "It is disorienting." "That tends to happen when truth sits in plain sight," he replied. "They treated my work like a harmless hobby," I continued. "Now they are scrambling." Forrest's voice carried no judgment. "They pushed you into a small box. You walked out without waiting for their permission. That alone can destroy the illusion they relied on." "They want explanations," I said. "Give them time to find their footing," he suggested. "You owe them honesty, not protection." The conversation shifted into work decisions after that. We reviewed deployment timelines for the first rollout wave. He outlined regional considerations affecting shorter adoption cycles. I recommended adjustments for hospitals with outdated compliance pipelines. The exchange unfolded easily, as if every piece clicked into place. When the conversation wound down, he collected his coat. At the doorway, he paused. "One more thing. Do not carry Colin's panic. His growth is his responsibility." I nodded. "I know." He gave a small, confident smile. "Good. Rest tonight. Tomorrow reshapes everything again." The apartment returned to stillness after he left. The quiet felt fuller this time, less like a void and more like a space I finally occupied fully. I walked toward the balcony, opened the door, and stepped into the evening air. Cold wind brushed my face, while the city below moved with steady rhythm. Hospital rooftops glimmered across the skyline like scattered signals from lives intertwined with our platform. A sense of steadiness settled beneath my ribs. Triumph never entered the room. Vindication stayed distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Victory over another person felt irrelevant to everything unfolding. A grounded calm centered solid, unmistakably mine. My thoughts drifted back to my mother's final message. Her voice carried a mixture of regret and hope. She wanted a daughter she could see clearly. My father wanted a narrative that allowed him to respect me without confronting his own cruelty. Colin wanted to survive the consequences of his arrogance. Each person sought something different. One sought forgiveness that had not been earned. Another reached for guidance that did not belong to them.
The last retreated into old habits desperate for comfort in the very dynamics that once harmed us all. Forgiveness could not be rushed. Healing demanded actions that had yet to appear. Understanding rested on willingness, not desperation. Accountability grew only when someone chose to stand still and face themselves. Relationships shift over time, and ours had reached that threshold. Certain ties might rebuild in years. Others would remain altered. A few had already dissolved into something unrecognizable.
When the final document was saved to the cloud, I closed my laptop and stepped onto the balcony. Cool air brushed against my face, carrying the faint smell of rain still holding back somewhere above the city. Lights flickered across the skyline in small waves. Cars moved below like sparks tracing the edges of a long, winding circuit. A realization settled across my chest with a calm strength. Earlier versions of me had faded. The woman standing in their place held her ground fully. Authority flowed through her words without needing force or volume. A quiet certainty defined the space around her, untouched by apology or hesitation. The direction she chose moved beyond the limits others once tried to place on her life. The night deepened around me, and the city's pulse aligned with my own. I lifted my gaze toward the horizon, feeling something quiet, something steady, something entirely mine. The digital assault began in the early morning. Messages exploded on my phone demanding a response that matched the volume of their panic. My mother's plea surfaced first, a fragile request for understanding stripped of its usual social armor. Next came my father's strained voicemail, a halting admission that danced around the edge of true remorse. Finally, Colin's desperate texts arrived, focused only on whether his new boss Vance still saw him as capable. The three voices converged, a chaotic choir, seeking absolution I was not yet ready to grant. I left the screen face down on the desk. Stillness was my strategy now. The city outside offered a gentle hum beneath the windows, its steady rhythm indifferent to the domestic crisis unfolding in my inbox. For the first time in my life, this quiet morning belonged solely to me. A faint aroma of coffee hung in the air. I lifted my mug, letting the heat settle in my hands. Outside, the world-sharpened light outlined the building's promising clarity. Work waited for me not as a burden, but as an anchor. Horizon Link's rollout required precision driven by necessity, not anxiety. My responsibility ahead was massive, yet it rested naturally on my shoulders. I listened to my father's recorded voice, halting words, attempts to reach certainty that failed, circling the truth without landing on it. I ended the message without a second thought. Colin's stream of panic followed. He feared his place in the company. He avoided acknowledging his history of dismissing me. Every line turned inward, confirming his inability to face his own actions. The screen dimmed. The room returned to its profound quiet. I settled at the desk with Evelyn's rollout charts. Planning soothed me more than any strained conversation with my family ever could. The work demanded clarity, not approval. Pages turned beneath my fingers, detailing how hospitals would implement the platform. Lives depended on these adjustments. Every decision shaped patient care. A knock sounded at my door just as I finished marking the last chart. Forrest entered with fresh folders. "The morning treated you gently," he observed, his gaze assessing. "I needed the stillness," I answered. We reviewed the integration strategy. The exchange flowed smooth, deliberate, and precise. He offered acknowledgement when we finished. "You handled everything with grace, even the part that would have broken most people." "They are still resisting the truth," I said. "They are. But you are not responsible for the pace of their growth." The door closed behind him. The evening arrived, and I prepared the final memo. Warm lamplight blended with the fading day. My thoughts returned briefly to them, my mother reaching for connection, my father confronting a truth he had ignored, Colin searching for reassurance I no longer owed him. A realization settled across my chest with calm strength. The woman standing in their place held her ground fully. Authority defined the space around her, untouched by apology or hesitation. The direction she chose moved beyond the limits others once tried to place on her life. The night deepened. I lifted my gaze toward the horizon, feeling something quiet, something steady, something entirely mine.
If you have ever been pushed aside, treated as invisible, or told you would never rise, I would like to hear your story. Tell me how you proved them wrong.